Hey guys, got another Type 59 replay here. This one's NA West in a nutshell. Ended up on Highway. They were actually planning on changing this map fairly recently, but they ended up not going through with it, which is kind of a shame because this map really just isn't fun to play. I don't know if the change would have improved it any. In fact, knowing wargaming it probably would have made it even worse, but at least it would have been something different. So, being in a medium tank, I decided to head out to the east side and try and have at least some presence in the field. Unfortunately, nobody else is heading this way. Now, I should have looked at the map and just turned around at this point, but sometimes it takes me a bit too long to jump from a sinking ship, and so I'm still heading over this way, despite the fact I have no support whatsoever. Our LTTB is actually positioning himself in a kind of useful spot. It's really dangerous going down there in a light tank though, because you're totally exposed and you're also surrounded by water, so if you have to move, you can't do it in a hurry. Our MX-12T, on the other hand, has run up through the forest on the 8 line, and the majority of our tanks are still pushing into the town, with 2 TDs left in base, one of them camping out on the wrong side of base, I think he's AFK, and the other one is basically outside of render distance. He can't help me if I get pushed because he's just too far back. I pull in behind the house, thinking I've got some cover here, and just edge out to try and get some spots. However, I wait too long in the open, and a 54E1's got 2 shots into me as I was trying to tell these guys, you can't just spot when you're alone. If you try and do that, the enemy will soon bottom onto the fact that you are unsupported and they'll push you and you'll get your shit wrecked. I mean, with a light tank maybe not so much, but when the enemy see a single medium, and especially when the medium is obviously unsupported, you know, there's all the visual cues. You can tell when a tank's not got any support with it. If he's got friends, he'll play a bit more boldly. He'll stay out of cover a bit longer. If the tank's just cowering behind a building like I was there, it means that there's nothing in support, usually. You can use this sometimes to bait puppies into driving out into a really big tank destroyer, but unfortunately teamwork is not that easy to pull off in this game. You can do it with platoon mates, but I wouldn't count on puppies to be useful for it. Knowing my luck, I would try and bait them into a tank destroyer, only for it to be looking in completely the wrong direction. Anyway, our JT, having not had shots at anything that I was spotting, is slowly shifting his position. I'm surprised he didn't know about the fact that he was out of render range there. He's ostensibly a good player. I mean, he isn't demonstrating it, but according to XVM, he has some idea what he's doing. With basically our entire team in town, we better hope that we win down there, but I'm just going to go ahead and spoil it. We didn't. So I take up a fairly cautious position here in a bush overlooking the valley. I'm not planning on playing aggressively, I just don't have the hit points for it. 2 shots from the 54E1 will kill me, a high roll from the ST1 will nearly kill me, and if any of the tank destroyers hit me, I'm as good as dead. I see a chance at the Tiger 2, he's just on the edge of my render range there. The LTTB is doing that spotting. And the SU-152 as well. Unfortunately, he is behind the bridge, so it's really difficult to get a shell through. I'd like to take that 152 out, but I have a much clearer shot of the Tiger, so I go for him. He's showing me just enough side that my shells are able to go through. The angle looks really skewy at this distance, but it's actually not too bad. Unfortunately, he does fade from spotting as the LTTB runs for dear life, and circles in behind myself and the JT. Ferdinand is still AFK, the JT is just sitting there, expecting tanks to drive into his gun, which to be fair, most of the time puppies on NA West are only too willing to do, usually when they're on my team. He manages to bag the Tiger 2, but there's still the 152 to worry about. That thing can potentially one-shot me, so I'm not keen on pushing it. At this point, I thought we were going okay in town, but then we lost a series of tanks in very, very quick succession, and suddenly it wasn't looking so good anymore. I don't know why. I think that our tanks in town were just not doing damage. They weren't using their guns because they weren't positioned terribly. They weren't positioned well, but they weren't positioned terribly. They should have had that fight. The 54E1 seems to have shuffled himself down to support town. The Centurion is last seen out in the field still. I don't know if he's moved or not. I don't want to risk getting shot by him. Sorry about Steam. I also, as I said, don't want to risk the SU-152 spotting me and getting a shot off, because he will probably see me before I see him. As good as my Type 59's camo is, I don't trust it to compete with a stationary 152. Our tanks in town just fold in half. There's no opposition left there for the enemy anymore. And I kind of realise at this point that it's going to be a desperate defence with me and the JT against all comers. The Ferdinand is a bot. He's not going to be contributing anything this match. I switched to APCR just because I need the extra pen against these odds. I could probably do this with AP, but I don't trust it. If I'm trying to carry a fucking, you know, like 2 verse, what's that, about 9 tanks? 2 verse 9 fight, because the LTTB will die very quickly as soon as he's engaged. I need every bit of help I can get. Suddenly tanks start getting lit all over the place as they push on the LTTB. I'd like a shot at that IS, but the hill is in the way. Similarly, the Ferdinand's blocked by terrain. The Oni, however, is completely out in the open, which gives me some easy shots. Now, I am sitting in the open myself. These trees don't provide much camouflage because I am obviously visible beneath the canopies. But I'm able to get a couple of shots into the Oni while bouncing any incoming fire. This is one of the situations where I will keep the front of a medium tank pointed at the enemy, but you've probably noticed in my medium gameplay that generally I don't worry too much about armor facings. I've kind of always had the idea that positioning is more important than armor in a medium tank, and so, as you can see here, I'm battleshipping completely, just because I've planned my next move, and that's the direction I need my movement facing. If you get too hung up on armor facings in a medium tank, you kind of stifle your own mobility, which is your main advantage. Even with APCR, the front of Ferdinand is kind of a sketchy target for the Type 59. But thankfully for me, I'm able to get some decent shots in. Our own Ferdinand goes down without doing anything useful. I do get a bounce there, and now the Centurion is up in my grill. Thankfully, it seems the Jagdtiger, who's still on full health, has managed to tie down the bulk of the enemy team, so I'm only having to worry about the Centurion and the Ferdinand, perhaps the T-28 at the moment. What's better is the LTTB is actually still alive, which is surprising. I would have thought he'd be the first to die. And he's helping me out with the Cent. Now, I probably could handle this Cent alone. He's an incredibly bad player. He's incredibly bad at aiming too, but the additional help from the LTTB is nice. To be honest, he probably would have got more out of helping the Jagdtiger. He had a lot more on his plate there, and he also has much more firepower than either of us do. Now there's a bunch of one-shottable tanks around me, but there's still that ST1 coming, who has a lot of hit points, and an ST1 is pretty much impenetrable without APCR in this thing, unless I can get around his back side. Down to my last APCR round after dispatching the Oni, but it's all over as the ST1 charges into my face. Unfortunately, there's not much else I could have done there, I don't think. Because I was so careless at the start of the match and lost more than half of my hit points in the opening minute, or thereabouts, I really didn't have the flexibility you need in a medium to carry those kind of odds. and so I was kind of at the mercy of whatever the enemy team did. But you live and you learn. Don't type when you're poked out from cover. Always make sure you're in decent cover. There's no point charging alone to an empty flank. You might kind of have this idea that you'll shore it up alone and at least buy your team time, but ultimately, particularly on an NA West with the quality, not being the correct word, but of players there, if you have any clue what you're doing when you play this game, you're more valuable alive to your team than you are dead. So even if you buy them a couple of minutes by dying on the flank, you've basically shot yourself in the foot, because buying a bunch of 45%ers time to shoot more HE at walls is not going to help you win, whereas letting the flank collapse and then fighting from a stronger defensive position may be a slightly better option. But, you know, I still ended up doing a fairly respectable amount of damage for a Type 59. I would have liked some more, but, you know, can't have everything. And hopefully I won't make that kind of mistake again. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. As ever, I'll see you on the next one.